Story 1, Maxim 78. The longer the briefing, the less it has to do with the fight. Margin notes. Every slide past 10 means one more soldier stops listening. Senior leaders give briefings to cover themselves, not to prepare us. Remember, when command talks too long, it is because they are not the ones who will be bleeding. Story 2. I could not stop chuckling that the brass were finally forced into a pointless 2-hour all-call after doing the same to the troops for years. Story 3. Some agreed with most of what he said, some agreed with parts of it, and some disagreed. Most were probably annoyed to be there. None of them will stick their necks out to support or oppose the policies. Story 4. I'm a retired Army officer. Regardless of these guys' political leanings, there is likely not a single person in the room who is not furious beyond words. Even if many lean right, no one likes not to be taken seriously. These people have a lifetime of sacrifices and accomplishments, and a large portion have had multiple combat tours. Even if some agree with Trump or with his desire to militarize blue cities, no one likes to be talked down to. No one wants a pep talk from people who have no experience, who lack the most basic understanding of what you do, and who see you as a pawn. Some in that room have over 100,000 service members under their command, manage budgets exceeding $100 billion, and appear before congressional committees. Now they are being demoralized and belittled by a couple of clowns. Imagine being at the top of your field after 40 years and having someone tell you you do not know how it really works, you do not understand leadership or what it means to be a real warrior. It is hard to grasp how furious many of these people are today. Imagine telling Michael Jordan he did not know basketball, telling Tom Brady he does not know what it means to be a football player, or lecturing Vince Lombardi on real leadership. This was not a good day. Story 5. Most people in that room are extremely well educated, many with multiple degrees. Most are well read in military history and geopolitics, and study of World War II is common. These are people who have spent their lives studying history and warfare. They remained quiet because they do not react without cause, because there is no immediate reason to, and because the wrong reaction could cost them 20 to 30 years of their careers. Behind closed doors they discuss the failures of their leadership, but only in whispers because if word gets out their careers could be ruined. I expect a slight increase in retirements over the next year because some know they will be targeted, as others have been. Story 6. As a veteran who has spent time around senior leadership, I would guess the mood among military staff at the meeting today was a mix of quiet discomfort and professional restraint. They remained stone-faced and silent during the speeches, which is standard. Generals and admirals are not going to react publicly in a setting like that. But the tone of the speeches, especially from Hegseth, came across as highly political and aggressive. That kind of messaging does not sit well with many people in uniform, especially when it blurs the lines between civilian leadership and military command. When suggestions emphasize loyalty tests or appearance over actual competence, it chips away at morale. I would imagine some felt frustrated or insulted, yet many may feel they must stay the course for the good of the institution. They may not agree with the direction, but walking away is not always an option when one is trying to keep things steady from the inside. Story 7. I worked for several senior officers who later became very senior flag officers, including 4-star officers. They were no-nonsense leaders who never took their eyes off the ball. I would say that 1 or 2 of them would have been contemptuous of such a nonsensical act. However, that was over 20 years ago, so I do not know how they would react now. In any case, I doubt any of them would speak publicly. Everyone I worked for remained silent and performed their duties in accordance with applicable laws, rules, and regulations. Personally, I am happy to be retired. I just worry about my daughter, who is serving on active duty now. Story 8. Most people were rolling their eyes at the Rora Pep Rally warfighter talk from Hegseth and were concerned about the mental well-being of their commander-in-chief. Most of the higher-ranking officers I dealt with were not much for platitudes or grunting or rhetoric. They were intelligent, educated, no-nonsense individuals with a job to do, troops to manage, and plans to make. My personal sentiment as an Air Force veteran from 2002 to 2008. What a fucking embarrassment. Kegsbreath is acting like a butterbar at his first squadron, swinging his tiny nuts around thinking he will change something. He should let the adults do their jobs and sit down before he hurts himself. Story 9. He announced United States cities will be the training sites for soldiers. That is illegal and, frankly, deeply frightens me for both citizens and the military. Story 10. Every attendee was irate before they walked into the room. Once you reach that level in the military, every second of your day is planned. You have several aides working for you, constantly adjusting your schedule to make it work. Having to drop everything, get on a plane, potentially stay overnight, and fly back just to have people who have never served a day in the military tell you how to run it was infuriating. That is why it was dead silent. Story 11. Most of them think they are idiots. None will say it out loud. They are annoyed that their time was wasted and will go back to what they were doing before. They just experienced what we all went through at every all-call. Story 12. How do you think a room full of career soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who have seen lifetimes of combat and who have studied and published countless volumes on strategy and doctrine would feel about a draft dodger and a weekend warrior flown in from around the world to lecture them on the warrior ethos as part of a larger agenda of pageantry and propaganda? Edited to add, Marines before I get destroyed. Story 13. Even those who share some personal political beliefs could not have thought this was worth their time. On top of wasting their time, it talked down to some of the most accomplished military leaders in the world. It highlighted the secretary's lack of understanding, qualifications, and competency. Remember that his military experience is limited to one branch, one function of that branch, combat arms, and part-time. I have great respect for the National Guard and reservists, but having served as both active and reserve, I can tell you there is a huge difference in understanding the whole military perspective. A National Guard Infantry 03 may believe the entire military boils down to physical training and a clean shave, and that every service member is an attack dog ready to be let off the leash, wanting to commit violence. His entire military exposure is 19-year-old infantrymen who want to fight and or have sex with anyone with a pulse. I installed a new home printer last week. That does not mean I am qualified to run Amazon. That audience, however, was full of well-educated, intelligent, accomplished professionals who understand the total force concept and how each wheel of the machine turns another. Men and women who have decades of learning, theory, and experience behind their decision-making. They know how to win a war. None of the warrior poets took that speech and thought, damn, I can finally lead troops now that this Ken doll has called me fat and stupid. Story 14. Senior officers understand that their interactions with their civilian leadership are politically charged and compartmentalize their opinions accordingly. Almost none of them are emotional about the content. I am reasonably sure they were furious to be removed from their commands without good reason. Story 15. I'm guessing they enjoyed this as much as I would enjoy a chief executive officer telling me how to practice medicine after being a doctor for 40 years. Story 16. My experience over 4 years of enlisted service was highly positive. My job had me meeting with our base commanding officer daily and, less frequently, with their higher command. 1. The great majority of senior military officers are intelligent and have traditional Republican leanings, by which I mean Eisenhower-style Republicans. 2. Leaders are where they are because they are patriotic and capable. While many may still cling to republicanism, most have come to understand that this is not what the destructive and lawless actors are doing. I am confident that nearly all are very worried about national security because of the current administration and the circus clowns now in high positions with access to sensitive information. Story 17. There were probably a few true believers in the upper ranks, but for most, I imagine their focus was on protecting their subordinates from this administration long enough to wait them out. Story 18. They love being told what to do by a television personality who did not have to climb through the ranks to get where he is. Story 19. Hegseth insulted many people. First he called them too fat. Then he strongly implied that many soldiers, both women and men, are too weak to do their jobs. He complained about facial hair. Worst of all, he insinuated that many women and soldiers of color were hired because of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and do not deserve their positions. It is obvious he wants a uniform army where everyone looks, thinks, speaks, and acts according to his personal idea of validity. After this mess, I do not see how anyone in the military could respect Hegseth for even 1 second. Story 20. They were appalled. Flag officers are generally intelligent and well-read. Trump and Hegseth wanted a pep rally and a Make America Great Again rally and did not get it. Instead, they sat with their hands in their laps and stoic expressions. The majority of these officers are like General Milley, not General Flynn. I think the mandatory all-hands meeting hurt them much more than it helped them. He threatened their rank and careers if they did not applaud him. Story 21. They are thinking the same thing a National Football League quarterback would think if an armchair quarterback told them how to do their job. Story 22. You must realize that if President Trump issues unlawful orders, they will not reach the desks of all these flag officers. For example, if President Trump orders the deployment of the 1st Marine Division to Portland, that order goes to one person. The commander of I Marine Expeditionary Force, Lieutenant General Wortman. He must determine whether the order is lawful. The spotlight will be on him. It is easy to look at a room full of decorated patriots and think there is no way they would go along with President Trump if he went off the rails. Things change when you realize they could be targeted one by one if he pursues a purge. Story 23. I guarantee that Trump lost most of them when he said he did not like how the new stealth ships looked. He thinks we should go back to the battleships of World War II. That is chilling. Spending money on obsolete equipment because it looks cool. With that comment, he lost almost all of them, no matter their personal political views. You do not win wars by wasting money on obsolete ships. It is the same as if he had said that howitzers are ugly and we should bring back the 12-pound cannon because they were really cool. Story 24. The one high-ranking individual I had the pleasure of working with was a base commander of a very important base in San Diego. I am not going to name names in this environment. He was disgusted by Donald Trump and wrote lengthy emails to the entire base saying so in as clear language as he could get away with. I am aware of many supporters of Make America Great Again among the rank and file of the military, but I also know that actions such as firing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a number of high-ranking officials for being black or for being women did not sit well with the senior leadership. Every military commander who has served with Trump, in my experience, has come to dislike him and called him not only an idiot but dangerous to our country. Generals and high-ranking officers are college-educated. I believe most of them are watching this display with horror and disgust. Story 25. Hopefully they remember that their oath is to the Constitution and not to a fascist pig. Story 26. They have better things to do. Why could this not be handled through a video conference or electronic mail? Story 27. Generals and admirals on average are extremely brilliant. By the time they reach flag rank, they usually have multiple master's degrees from various in-service universities or civilian schools. They understand the distinct line between military and law enforcement, and I do not expect any of them would follow unlawful orders. Story 28. Having worked for 3 general officers, they definitely would not have enjoyed a pep talk from a trumped-up Army National Guard major. Story 29. Nobody has mentioned no more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. So is the leadership instructing them to break the law? And who are the military currently being deployed against? Protesters? Are they being sent to murder protesters? Story 30. Poser wannabe tough guy. He probably watched movies like Patton to work himself up for it. It is likely an attempt to save face for the debacle that was the military parade a few months ago when Hegseth was heavily criticized for it not having the desired effect. These men are clowns in cosplay. Real commanders walk silently and carry a very big stick. Story 31. I feel most people are sick to their stomachs, as I am. I spent more than 20 years working for the United States Department of Defense, now the Department of War, in addition to serving as a veteran before that. I am sick. Story 32. Not me, but my brother. He retired as a full colonel during the first Trump administration. He literally had a retirement party the night President Trump bombed Syria. My father spoke to him on the phone today. He said my brother's side of the conversation was one-sided and full of language he does not normally use. It was mostly swearing. He added that my brother's remarks echoed those of people still serving at similar or higher levels, possibly including people present today. Story 33. Check the comments on Fox News. The former military personnel there are embracing this. Based on comments here and on Fox News, the reaction will split along ideological lines. People are not thinking logically anymore. If you support Make America Great Again, you accept everything. Those of us who despise the man and the movement do not accept any of it. Story 34. This was a ridiculous waste of time and money. It was foolish to announce that all generals would be there. It showed ignorance and a lack of security precautions. Story 35. There is nothing like being talked down to by a man who barely attained the rank of major in the National Guard. Never has the Secretary of Defense been so wholly unqualified, with a time horizon of at most 48 hours. Story 36. Back in the early 1990s, I served as aide-de-camp to a Marine Major General. He had been a captain in Vietnam, a forward observer, and was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. By then he was the commanding general of the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center. He was in his late 50s, wiry as a rail, still posting excellent physical fitness test scores, and in the front pew at Mass every Sunday. That man would have had nothing but contempt for being yanked away from his duties to play political theater. He would not have clapped when Donald Trump took the stage. In his view, respect was earned in the field, not demanded from a podium. At the time, the Marine Corps was capped at 65 general officers. With so few general officers, they all knew each other, who they respected, who they distrusted, and who was not fit for higher command. Most weak generals never made it to 2 stars because the pack sniffed them out early. If he were around today, he would have dismissed Hegseth as nothing more than a kid. I suspect many of his peers in the general officer and flag officer community feel the same way. Story 37. The most military thing I have ever seen. Hurry up and wait. Pete Hegseth's muster with general and flag officers and their senior enlisted advisors basically amounted to a uniform inspection and an impromptu class on military appearance and standards. I'll save you a click. Report to the skipper in Quantico in service alpha uniforms. Something about the boss wanting to hear himself speak again. Get your waistlines in check. Police that mustache. Shave every day, no excuses. You are warriors. Act like it. Okay. Roger that. But are the troops still getting paid tomorrow, sir? Squelch that noise, Jones. Not now. Same stuff, different day. Story 38. Hegseth's plan, as he stated in his remarks, is to clean house of non-believers in his grand vision of a Christo-fascist version of the armed services. It has been 20 years since I served. I cannot say with insight what is happening in units and formations today. His description of standards not being met or enforced is not new. I have listened to commanding officers and senior non-commissioned officers say this every time a new command was on board. But his reliance on the merit argument is flaccid at best. He seems confident that he can be the sole arbiter of the standard that needs to be met. It appears to be a lot of top-down force-feeding of his culture change. When you do not agree, you are dismissed. The idea that personnel is policy is his weakest argument. I never got to choose my personnel. I could only mentor, coach, care for, and discipline them. In a perfect world or on a small team mission, that is different. A project manager can isolate and use counseling and performance reviews to ensure no useless team member will skate through the promotion ranks. Good leadership gets the best out of those they lead. It does not complain about being ignored or disrespected. Good leadership does not browbeat, threaten, or demean subordinates. He used many warrior ethos catchphrases but offered nothing new. He played the I serve to card, but his use of the word merit makes me wonder what he has done to deserve his position. There is a war coming, but it is a culture war. Just my take on what I saw and heard. Story 39. I have a friend in the military. I asked him, a Republican but not a Trumpster, what he would do if ordered to swear loyalty to the president. He answered quickly that he had already taken an oath and it was not to the president. Honorable men respect their oaths. They are out there. Story 40. As a former Air Force Reserve nurse, I think expecting the 45-year-old doctor who joined after his divorce to be in the same shape as a frontline Marine will thin the ranks. They have done this before with major physical training changes. Half of the reserve force is about to be placed on medical profile for pushing themselves to complete an 8-minute mile. Story 41. I have worked in close proximity to generals for years, attending operations center daily briefings, giving presentations and proposals to them, and speaking daily with majors through colonels. United States generals are usually intelligent, respectable leaders who couch their words carefully. They are exemplars of excellence and leadership and believe it will trickle down to lower echelons. As for what generals and senior leadership really think, in public they usually will not say much. They value their careers and have been apolitical for centuries. Elected officials come and go. Their duty is to serve the country regardless of who the president is, so they generally keep their political opinions to themselves. In private, I imagine many are seething and despondent, like other thoughtful citizens. Some lower-ranking officers and enlisted personnel might be enthusiastic supporters of former President Trump and watch Fox News, but those types rarely advance far. They often become pigeonholed into less important positions and ride out irrelevant careers into retirement. Much like Stalin, I expect a purge of high-ranking officials who refuse to pledge loyalty to him in the coming months. It is going to cause a massive national security crisis that will be very difficult to recover from. Story 42. Almost everyone in the room thinks Hegseth is a clown. Story 43. As an American, I'm hopeful that they will collectively stand behind the Constitution and ensure Americans are protected, not vilified. Story 44. I can say with almost certainty that the entire spectacle was offensive and professionally embarrassing to the audience. For those not in the know, review the records of some audience members. Imagine those people being lectured about lethality and standards by a junior major in the National Guard. The audience averages about 40 years of service and multiple combat tours. They are responsible for the lives of thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, and Marines and manage budgets in the billions. Many hold doctoral degrees and were being lectured about a company commander's idea of standards and discipline. Story 45. I would imagine officers know that Trump was a draft dodger, that he lied about giving the armed services their first pay raise in a decade, and that he had the United States ship John McCain moved out of sight. I am sure that his threatening them did not go down well. Story 46. If I were a conspiracy theorist, I would say it is quite possible he brought them together physically to passively install Pegasus spyware when their personal phones attempted to connect to a fake cell tower, a Khashoggi-style operation to monitor their personal communications and determine who is loyal. Story 47. I have driven for a lieutenant general who served with Stormin Norman and for General McCaffrey. I have also been chewed out by a few, most of whom were politicians. When on duty, they are more calculating than most elected officials. Once they reach that level, they see through the people on the stage. Their silence is how they speak, and they will speak privately. It was not good or smart to take them away from what they love and to accuse them of violating their oath. This was a test. Story 48. Contempt. Everyone in the room knows they are better than he is. Story 49. I can imagine a non-zero number of people left that room willing to plot a junta. Story 50. Should have been an email. The point was the televised propaganda clips they will now use to justify their actions. It was a ratings game. Story 51. Hegseth's highest rank was captain. Imagine the generals and admirals listening to him. Story 52. I have been reading all the responses in this very interesting thread, and I just want to say thank you to all of you, active duty service members and veterans. You mean more to us Americans than you can ever imagine. Stay safe and please remember your oath. Story 53. I really do not care what their sentiments are. I want to know what they will do when they have to choose between a cushy retirement and the rights and lives of Americans. Story 54. Why was it televised? Doing something so rare and then broadcasting it makes you wonder. Just kidding, we all know why. Story 55. The single-finger Rockefeller Street salute. Were there any hua or other expressions of support? By the way, did anyone notice that Hegseth's clown suit mirrored the bizarre American Nazi flag uniform of Howard W. Campbell Jr.? If you are not familiar, search online for the name and view the images. The only difference is that Kurt Vonnegut meant it as a surreal parody of American Nazism. Hegseth does not realize he is a caricature of himself. Story 56. No one applauded. No one is happy. He could have done this through a memo and saved us a lot of money and aggravation. But this narcissistic alcoholic wanted to strut and show how tough he is in front of all those generals and officers. I can't help wondering how many of them voted for Trump. Story 57. I am a war veteran, and I continue to be disgusted with this administration. We treated the people of Iraq with more dignity than they say they want to treat American citizens. These are sick people, and I hope every Democratic political ad in 2026 consists of supercuts of Americans being brutalized by immigration and customs enforcement agents pretending to be combat soldiers. Story 58. I have a friend whose son is a lieutenant in the United States Air Force. He is an Air Force Academy graduate. I asked if his son had commented on the political leanings of the people he served with or was posted with. He said that the majority of enlisted personnel are supporters of Donald Trump. The majority of officers were more centrist or left-leaning. Does anyone else see this? Story 59. I took an oath to protect and defend the United States Constitution, not the president. As the child of a career United States Navy officer, I can say they think of that constantly. These are military professionals. Story 60. I am not military myself, but I hope to God the sentiment is mutiny. Story 61. A small part of me is dying that they were forced to listen to those idiots blather on for almost 2 hours. At least they got to sit. The larger part of me is profoundly sad that the nation and institutions of power protect and perpetuate this bullshit. The admiral I worked under probably sat still as a statue and had to restrain himself from standing up and physically assaulting Kegsbreath. Story 62. I spoke with one of my former commanding officers a couple of months ago, a Navy captain equivalent to a colonel in the Army, about this administration. He was angry and frustrated by what is going on in the government. In fact, he told me he was advising his adult children to move out of the country if things got much worse. On the other hand, I know a lot of men who were Navy officers, and many of them are more angry about President Biden's supposed improprieties than those of President Trump. I know not to debate them because it is pointless. It makes me want to sit them down in a corner for a timeout. Story 63. Trump briefly had their attention when he threatened them with the loss of rank and career. It was all sweet and tempting, but a civilian will never tell five-star generals how to conduct their business, no matter the bait. A deranged draft dodger will not get what he wants by flattering the chain of command with what he believes will motivate them to comply. At the end of the day, Trump is the embodiment of everything they hate about the civilian world. A lazy, overweight, undisciplined, disloyal playboy. Their entire careers were built on honor and discipline, and they were asked to listen to a second-rate civilian with no military command experience, which was an assault on the military hierarchy. Story 64. The captain of my first ship was the most senior captain in the Navy. He did not suffer fools. He would have laughed at a man like this. Story 65. When I was enlisted in the service, I swore an oath to the Constitution, not to a president. The office was always called Commander-in-Chief, and it was understood that the job was temporary. It was also understood that the Constitution was the law. We had the right to disobey an unlawful order. I hope and assume our military leadership took and understood that same oath as I did. Story 66. I am glad the brass received a personal demonstration of both men's stunning incompetence and incoherence. They will second-guess orders even more, which may not be a bad thing for the American people right now if one can look past how gross it all is. Story 67. By the time they reach the highest level of flag or general officer command, they have finely tuned their detectors for misleading information. Add another 4 to 15 years in flag or general officer positions and they can smell nonsense a mile away and learn to use it to their advantage. So it is funny to me that people who are used to calling out less senior officers and enlisted personnel for bringing them misleading information had to sit through a river of it for 2 hours with no recourse. The ones with souls, anyway. Some are there just for the stars. Story 68. I think many people believe that Trump sees the walls closing in around him. He idolizes dictators, and he is getting a front row seat to what happens when dictators go too far. Putin is on shaky ground. Reportedly, he was whisked away on an airplane to a bunker near where he grew up, which is very rare. For context, he has roughly 5 doubles, including the disabled one that went to Alaska and is often used in front of the camera. Putin has an exact replica of the rooms he uses for interviews, perfectly mimicking the actual room in Moscow. He has several replicas of that room in various parts of Russia. The Russians are not in a cold, dark place yet, but winter is coming. Ukraine strong. Story 69. People wonder how governments in other countries are overthrown by their militaries. Story 70. The people in that room, sitting in those seats, are some of the most intelligent, well-educated people our country has to offer. And, as Trump says, smart people don't like me. They sat through the meeting because they had to. Nothing of merit was on the line except their jobs. It was an easy win. When the time comes for Trump's inevitable attempt to turn the military on Americans, rest assured those people in those seats will make sure it does not happen. Story 71. An overzealous second lieutenant with an itchy trigger finger who complains about the rules of engagement is practically a meme. They are too inexperienced to understand that constraining kinetic operations is often necessary to achieve mission objectives. Yet this former second lieutenant lectures real combat leaders on the art of war. Pathetic. Story 72. I'm sure having a drunk who was relieved of duty and a draft dodger as their bosses fills them with pride and confidence. Story 73. They will drag their feet on anything they do not like and put on meaningless dog and pony shows while waiting for the next person. Story 74. I guess we will find out if we have real men in the military. They need to come out together, 99 or whatever number, and they need to shout, "He's a lunatic." Impeach. Every Democrat who is interviewed should simply repeat the word impeach. Story 75. I think they were furious that a major from the National Guard was lecturing them about how horrible the military has been, now that he is in charge. Story 76. I served 4 years. Our military is not full of the best and brightest. We are in trouble, you all. Story 77. The smart ones hate Trump. The greedy and lazy ones want to get on his bandwagon. Story 78. In veiled terms, they intend to get rid of as many women and black men as they can. Story 79. When I was in the Army, there was a ranking of respected officers. 1. West Point graduates, United States Military Academy graduates. 2. Non-commissioned officers and officer candidate school cadets. 3. Reserve Officers Training Corps and Officer Candidate School Cadets. 4. Army Reserve. 5. National Guard Pete Hegseth. We called them weekend warriors. They enjoyed the prestige of being in the military but effectively played soldier 1 weekend a month and a few weeks in the summer. I heard stories of National Guard units going on campouts with beer and other alcohol. The National Guard are literally the last line of defense for the United States. If every other service member died, the National Guard would be left to wave the white flag for the invaders. Every general or admiral in that room has earned the right to be there. To see Pete Hegseth acting like a television soldier must surely gall them. The only branch that might be susceptible to Pete's braggadocio is the Marines. They embrace that meathead ethos Pete preaches, though even they likely dislike his Ken doll approach to the military. Story 80. I retired from the military over 25 years ago, but I dearly hope that most of these senior leaders were horrified. Story 81. They were probably thinking the same thing lower-ranking personnel think whenever the command made us attend a 2-hour briefing in the base theater that should have been an email. Story 82. People who are faithful to their careers in politics will be 100% behind everything that was said today. Actual leaders who serve with purpose are really fucking annoyed right now at having their time wasted. I am interested to see where things go from here. I expect we will start seeing many readiness reports being falsified in the near future. Story 83. All those stars have on average more than 30 years of service. I respect the National Guard, but when they have to listen with a straight face to a major in the Minnesota National Guard talking about duty and service despite his lack of qualifications, they are deep down laughing and saying, "Get out of here." Story 84. So my experience talking to senior officers about George W. Bush and Dick Cheney is this: they probably strongly dislike them personally, but they are so opposed to the strawman version of liberalism fed to them by right-wing news outlets that nothing those politicians could do would cause the officers to do more than express lukewarm support. The senior officers will let them do anything, and if a reckoning comes later, they will justify their actions by saying, "Yeah, but what was I supposed to do? Back the liberals?" Story 85. I've never been extremely pro-military or pro-war, But here I am hoping that some buzzcut Chad takes duty and honor more seriously than his future. Funny how shit changes. Story 86. Generals gathered in their masses. Just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that plot destruction. Sorcerer of death's construction. In the fields, the bodies burning. As the war machine keeps turning. Death and hatred to mankind. Poisoning their brainwashed minds. O Lord. Story 87. One thing is fairly certain. We will see in the days to come whether any of them are true leaders. Story 88. They keep their mouths shut. When anything you say is misconstrued, misunderstood, or simply not what the dear leader wants to hear, the only acceptable response is yes, sir. Story 89. I got out after 6 years of active duty, but I was around many of these people and I am sure they are fuming. First, being called fat and lazy. Second, being told what to do, even though these service members worked very hard to get this far. Keep in mind Hegseth was a National Guard major, but those of us on active duty never thought much about the reserves or the Guard, whether they deployed or not. It was just the way things were. Story 90. I laughed hysterically at a major in the reserves who had deployed to a combat zone. He would be bullied as a boot. Story 91. Why the F word did I have to travel the globe to listen to the person in charge? I swore an oath to the Constitution to defend and protect. I know my job. Could have been an email or a signal chat. Story 92. They all wanted to play whack-a-mole on Hegseth. It is disgraceful to waste millions on zero content. Story 93. What a pity some of the top brass did not take the stage to arrest Hegseth and Trump, seizing control of the government. Story 94. 1% are willing to sell out. The rest are some version of Mattis or Kelly. Story 95. They are angry. They were just insulted by two incompetent people. Story 96. Another worthless meeting with an idiot who has no business leading anyone. Hegseth could not lace my boots on his best day. Story 97. Hegseth commands very little respect across the military. A room full of generals, all of whom were annoyed to have to make the trip and were forced to listen to someone far less qualified, did not react well. Story 98. I doubt they appreciated it. A fucking Fox News anchor was lecturing them about lethality. These are generals. They have more experience, knowledge, wisdom, and backbone than those two combined. They are really trying to politicize the military, and it's not going to work. Story 99. Lectured by a drunk and a coward with bone spurs. Priceless. Story 100. I never served, so I feel awkward commenting, but this is one of many reasons you should not hire someone who has worked in television for their entire career for a position of power that requires critical thinking, much less give them $1 trillion a year to allocate. Their only training is in aesthetics and appearances, such as making a small crowd look large and applying makeup. If this is the best the United States can do, we are leaving ourselves open to invasion. Story 101. It's hard to guess the minds of others, but I was on active duty as an enlisted service member for 20 years. I am sure there were mixed sentiments, but I guess the majority of admirals and generals would not appreciate this particular dog and pony show. I also imagine that most of them are not on board with being deployed on American soil to fight Americans, that is, if any of them took their oath seriously. Story 102. Their reaction was one of utter contempt and disbelief. I have served in the army, and this display of sheer insanity was atrocious. Story 103. It does not matter what the sentiment is. What matters is whether they actually do anything about it. Story 104. More accurately, most of them are praying for retirement to arrive quickly so they can be done with this nonsense. Story 105. The crowd honored duty and service. The clowns on stage were drunks and criminals. Story 106. The real question is whether, once they receive the order to kill civilians, they will follow it. Story 107. I worked directly for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for 5 years some time ago, under the first Trump administration. They did not respect the position then. I doubt they respect it now, and rightfully so. The people in the White House were incompetent. Story 108. Most comments said these generals are aiming for retirement after the speeches, which I found amusing. Their job is to protect the Constitution and the people of the United States. Yet when threats that aim to destabilize the United States appear, instead of springing into action, they retire. It is as if their job were to retire. A comment said the generals would be picked off one by one if Trump went for a purge. So if the generals are picked off one by the enemy, will they stop doing anything altogether? Story 109. Almost all of them will think it was unnecessary but are savvy enough to smile, nod, and return to the mission. A small number may lack the discretion to follow the program's direction and decide they are better suited to the private sector. Story 110. Some welcome a return to the basics of a strong military. Others see opportunity or oppose it. Within a year, the upper ranks will be loyal to the president. Story 111. My experience working with Air Force generals is that they are smart, ambitious, and vain and dislike being told they are wrong. Most will not admit to mistakes. I have met few like United States Army General Mark Milley, who is highly educated and able to speak beyond his ego about his views on what military leaders should be. I think all the general officers attending the meeting in Quantico have watched their female peers get sidelined or retired and did not resign in protest. I suspect they are trying to maintain their positions and ambitions despite what the Trump administration is doing. They will follow orders until those orders become so egregious that they cannot, or they will support the administration no matter what. They do not want to be the first to refuse because that general officer would be burned. Story 112. As a veteran, I know that most people in the military take their oaths seriously. This does not guarantee anything, but it makes it less likely that Donald Trump will be able to rely on the military as much as he and his billionaire supporters think. Story 113. I couldn't imagine being a senior officer and pledging my loyalty to a draft dodger. I would lose a lot of self-respect. Story 114. My mentor was a two-star general. During his military and civilian service career, he not only worked directly under President Reagan but was also involved in the continuity of government underground complex in the aftermath of September 11, 2001. He would have hated what was going on, and I am glad he missed it. Story 115. The competence gap between the leaders in that room and the buffoons wasting their time is the lions led by donkeys idiom made flesh. None of them are perfect, but everyone earned their positions through many years of hard work, determination, and real leadership. These are leaders who understand what is at stake. It must be very disheartening to be brayed at like this. I have to imagine that the true purpose of this meeting is not yet known. Perhaps determining who is loyal to the Constitution rather than to current leadership, or visually identifying those they want to fire, or some other unknown nefarious reason. These leaders spent 1 or 2 lifetimes removing people like Hegseth from the service for repeated driving under the influence offenses. Story 116. As someone outside the United States, I am curious why everyone is so concerned about what your military will do to the civilian population. You are not rising up against fascism, so why all the concern? They have nothing to put down by force because you are not using the Second Amendment to take your country back. The irony is that of all the repressive governments in the world, I thought the United States would have fought back first and hardest. Story 117. I, as a veteran, was removed from the Reddit military channel for pointing out that this would happen. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.